Merry Christmas, everyone. We here at Kicking the Seat, we love the holidays and we love talking about movies that come out in the holidays. Hence the reason we're talking about A Complete Unknown, the brand new film from James Mangold, which charts a very small but significant window in the life of Bob Dylan. Um, I'm here with two of the biggest Bob Dylan fans I know, filmmaker, critic, all around great guy, Michael Glover Smith, whose latest short film, Handle with Care, is actually now out on streaming. You can catch it via Split Tooth Media. I'll have a link down below. We also have David Fowlie of Keeping It Real. Now, between the two of you guys, how many times have you seen Dylan in concert? Mike, I know your individual answer. David, I want to get your answer and see if I can do the math in my head.
I think I'm somewhere around 10 or 10, somewhere 10, 11 times.
Say 12, David. It'll 12, make 12, Ian's math 12, more fun.
12 times. 12 times.
Okay, so that's 100 because Michael, I saw the other day you've seen Bob Dylan 88 times in the course of your life. So wow. Have you ever met him?
I have not, and I don't know if I ever would want to. I like just observing and admiring from a distance.
Well, it's interesting you say that because after watching A Complete Unknown, I don't want to meet Dylan either. So here's the thing. This could be a very interesting conversation because, Michael, you called A Complete Unknown the greatest American film of 2024. And you wrote about it in New City, which I'll also have a link to down below. I read it. I appreciate your points. I think the difference, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because, David, you've got a different perspective you can bring to the table. It is not yours because you saw the film with your daughter, who I assume, as you know, someone who's much younger than all of us, she has not seen Bob Dylan 10 or 88 times or even is immersed in the lore of his life. I am kind of a Dylan novice. I know a lot of the songs, know very little about him, which, from what I understand, he's an enigmatic cat. But going into the movie, I'm like, okay, I'll learn something about Bob Dylan, but I don't feel like I got anything out of this movie except for the guy was immensely talented, in the right place in the right time in history, and had the guts to make some significant changes to the music landscape, but was also a complete asshole. And I don't say that just as like an outside observer. I say that as echoing back the sentiments a lot of the characters in this movie throw his way over the course of these 2+ hours. So let's start there. Michael, as the defender, as the lover, the appreciator of A Complete Unknown, and a rabid Dylan fan, tell me, how did you approach this movie? What were you expecting? And I want to give you the hardest question. In your mind, is it possible to make a bad Bob Dylan biopic?
It absolutely is possible to make a bad Bob Dylan biopic. And I was honestly fearful that I would not appreciate this movie because even though I love Bob Dylan, that doesn't mean I love everything associated with him. I mean, I think he's written some bad songs. I think he's given some bad live performances. And he's released some, questionable albums as well, especially back in the mid 1980s. But, having said all that, because I am a big part of the online Dylan fan community, I have been anticipating this movie for 5 years. It was announced way back in January of 2020, and then it was put on hold first because of COVID, and then during, James Mangold was going to direct this movie, and then COVID happened, and then he did Indiana Jones instead, and then Chalamet did both Dune movies and Wonka, and then they were going to shoot it in 2023 once their schedules cleared up, and then the strikes happened, so that pushed it to 2024. So this is a long way. This is kind of a roundabout way of saying I was like hyper aware of all of these developments because I'm on Dylan Twitter. And so I'm seeing every single update. I mean, the role of Pete Seeger in this film was originally going to be played by Christian Bale.
And then Benedict Cumberbatch, right?
No, Benedict was second after Christian Bale dropped out, and then Benedict Cumberbatch had to drop out, and Edward Norton, who I think is fantastic in this film, was actually the last person to come on board. He only came on board like a couple months before they started filming, and he had to learn how to play the banjo from scratch. Whereas, Timothée Chalamet had 5 years to practice guitar, piano, harmonica, and singing. So, to answer your question, Ian, I was kind of cautiously optimistic because I am a Mangold fan. I think he's one of the more interesting Hollywood studio directors of recent decades. I think his best films are great. But I also think his worst films are pretty mediocre, including the last one. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I think, is one of his worst films. So I was hoping it would be good, but I was kind of bracing myself that it would be mediocre. And honestly, it exceeded my expectations. I thought it was really emotional film. I laughed a lot. I was surprised by that. I actually cried a couple times. And I thought that the entire ensemble cast was, I thought everybody was great in this movie. And, Mangold, in my opinion, is a phenomenal director of actors. Even in his bad movies, nobody gives a bad performance in a Mangold film. And this is the kind of film where I think the focus is on the performances, not only the acting performances, but, the musical performances as well. So that, in a nutshell, is why I loved it.
Solid.
Yeah.
No, I cannot disagree with that take. David, how about you?
Well, I'm definitely a Bob Dylan fan, and I mean, if Dylan didn't come into my life during my high school years, I don't know what would have happened. But and so it's been interesting to see, like, my daughter getting an interest in Dylan even before her future husband Timothée Chalamet was cast in the movie. Because she has been getting into a lot of like singer-songwriter stuff, like Noah Kahan and Zach Bryan and Springsteen, and so the natural transition is Dylan, and of course with Chalamet, she's even more interested, and so I asked her actually at dinner just this evening. I'm like, if you were to sell a complete unknown to somebody, why should somebody see this? And she's like, well, I think it's a great just kind of time capsule of a very specific time in New York folk that maybe not a lot of people know about so much anymore. I mean, sure, maybe if you've seen it Inside Llewellyn Davis, sure, but that's a different type of story from another. But there's a lot of perspectives to mine in the Greenwich Village folk scene, and but my daughter was really taken by how that era was kind of presented and reproduced, and I'm with Michael. I think Mangold and his production team does an amazing job at transporting us to that era. As soon as young Bobby, as Edward Norton's Pete Seeger would call him, as soon as young Bobby like exits the bus and gets off and starts walking his way around the village and the neighborhood, I mean, it's great for those who know the area, and even for those who don't. It's just like, wow, where is this? And even if there was a lot of, like, let's say CGI replicating or it seems very seamless, and it seems very natural and authentic. And so it really helps. It definitely helped me, and obviously my daughter, to just transport a viewer into that era and say, hey, we're inviting you into something that doesn't exist anymore. And here's what happened then. And I think that's important. I mean, icons can be the icon status and the legend status can sometimes overwhelm the kind of the history of it all, and the kind of like the founding, the initial steps of kind of wins and losses or success and failures that these artists who would go on to become icons initially had. And I think something like this microcosm of his career is pretty poignant and important. And I think it shows that on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Again, from my perspective coming into this, I take both of your points about Mangold being able to set a time and place, but I don't give him a lot of credit for that because he has all this big studio money in the world to do that. It's kind of like going to see a comic book movie and you expect to be able to see the most fantastical, like space monsters or mutants or something. The only time it stands out is when there's a bad CGI shot, and there was none of that. There was none of that here. But you brought up Inside Llewyn Davis, which I kept thinking about watching this movie, and personally, I feel is the far superior film because with that character, and they're very similar, and I think that deliberately so. What the Coen brothers are trying to do is make a Bob Dylan story without making a Bob Dylan story.
Well, that granted, just to preface that movie followed Dave Von Ronk primarily. It was
don't care.
Yeah, he was another. Okay, but I'm just saying it's like, and look at the titles of both these movies. Inside Llewyn Davis, A Complete Unknown.
Right, and here's the thing: if I'm going to spend 2+ hours with a character, the title, A Complete Unknown, had better be ironic unless there's something ultimately compelling for someone who's not, I'm going to use this term lightly, a fanboy, to come away with, right? Because again, I'm watching this, there's a big running joke about how it used to be in a carnival. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm thinking, okay, this is some bit of like Bob Dylan internet lore that 10 people in the audience at the AMC are going to laugh out loud, and everyone else will be like, what the fuck? Yeah, okay, he was in a carnival or he wasn't. We know nothing about where he came from, and up to the point where he got off that bus. And at the end, when he's at the Newport Folk Festival and he's forcing electric, rock and roll on the crowd who clearly doesn't want it. And there's this whole thing of Pete Seeger running around trying, he's going to grab the axe, but then his wife steps in and gives him the stare. I'm like, all he's doing is trying to preserve the integrity of an organization that was holding a specific event that is being sabotaged by someone who, by all accounts, is only trying to do something that he wants to do and no one else who paid to go there wants to see. So I'm like, why am I invested in the main character of this movie who is a complete unrepentant, misogynist, cheating, jerk genius? It's great. I love the music, but I don't know him by the end. I don't want to.
You just described so many artists, politicians. I mean, that's just, I mean, that's
right. But here's the thing. It usually, in the cases of biopics that are made about them, there is something that draws you in as a hook to understand why people put up with them. And I don't get any of that here.
Okay. Can I jump in? Ian,
please. I invited you on this show.
I agree. I agree with everything that you just said. But all of the reasons why you are resisting this movie are the very reasons why I admire it so much. Because I am not a fan of the biopic genre, because I feel like there's some the armchair psychology of it, reducing a human being's psychology to a mathematical formula is what this genre does. I mean, La Bamba, Ray, Walk the Line, Bohemian Rhapsody, Rocket Man. It's like all of these films are about people who have some trauma in their past. They've got demons they're wrestling with, and the demons are the thing that caused them to, thirst for success. And so we understand it. We understand it because it's very simple. And we say, oh, I know who this person is. But can we really know who these people are? I mean, isn't this kind of an overly simplistic way of presenting character? What I like about A Complete Unknown is I agree with David. It's really about America between 1961 and 1965. It's not just Dylan, it's Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Johnny Cash, the whole Greenwich Village folk revival scene during that period. And I get your point that, yeah, he's got a $100 million budget, so he can recreate the period through those incredible street scenes where, he's redressing entire city blocks and there's cars, appropriate to the period. And he's shooting 360 degrees. It's not like, I do love Inside Llewyn Davis, but Inside Llewyn Davis is, you can feel the budgetary constraints, especially with the outdoor scenes.
Right.
You'll have two characters on a park bench in front of a building that existed in 1963. And that they can't turn the camera this way or that way because they don't have the budget to convince you, to immerse you in the period. But for me, it's not just about the production design. It's about the actual spirit of the times. That's what I think this film captured. It doesn't matter who Dylan is. It matters what he did at that time. It's like, and I think the film does a very good job of showing how at that time musicians weren't expected to write their own songs. That was a weird thing to do. It's like you had songwriters. That was their job. They wrote songs in the Brill building, for other people to sing. And then Dylan was the first person to come along, to write his own songs that were highly personal, that were political. Blowin' in the Wind was written in 1962 and it became an anthem for the civil rights movement. So that was a game changer. And it's really about, and Masters of War, that incredible sequence where you see all those people watching the news.
That was the best part of
it's the best part of the whole film. Yeah, everyone's looking at the Cuban Missile Crisis on TV, and Joan Baez freaks out, and it's like she wants to leave town, and she runs out into the streets, and then she goes downstairs into this club, and Dylan's playing Masters of War. But you see all these people through their windows, they're all watching TV, and they're all watching the same thing. Mm-hmm. And to me, this was like science fiction, because today, we're living in a different world. It's like today, everyone's watching something different. But back then, you had 3 television channels. You had ABC, CBS, NBC. So when you turned on your TV back then, you're all watching the same thing. So So I understand why you're resisting it, because it's actually a weirder film than I think a lot of people realize, because it's not about a person, it's about the time and the impact that his art had at that time on society. So I loved it for that reason.
And that's the thing is I understand that perspective. I don't agree with it. Because much like the $100 million budget thing, we've had so many movies about the 1960s. It's one of the most well-mined cultural time periods ever. It's become a genre cliche in and of itself. And I think there have been these same topics, the political strife, human drama has been covered much better in other places. So here I agree early on, the whole idea of, Dylan's struggle to break out of this box where his first record is all covers. And he's like, well, I can write my own songs. And they're like, not on your first one. That's cool. You said these are personal and political songs. I don't believe they're personal because they might be personal to him. But again, I don't know who he is or why I should care about whatever he has to say. He's a poet, but he feels a poet like a poet to me, as presented in this film, as every postmodern artist who came after Warhol was a painter. You paint the soup cans, it's revolutionary because it hasn't been done before. It's audacious to call it art. But then you've got, okay, I'm going to paint a black dot in the middle of a 100-foot white canvas and sell it to a museum for $100 million. That says nothing about the quote unquote artist, but it says something about the commerce, the pop culture in which they swim. I needed more from this movie. I felt like I was constantly on the outside looking in, and relating more to the surrounding characters, to Joan Baez, and to Sylvie, which I read from your piece, Michael, was based on another character with very, very similar first and last name.
Suze Rotolo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was Dylan's real life girlfriend who, was not a celebrity. So Dylan himself requested that her name be changed.
Okay.
But I do agree with you. She's the one that you relate to the most because she's the one who is kind of the audience surrogate.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one who observes him, on his rise to fame.
Yeah. And and she keeps she's drawn back to him. But again, I don't know if it's the mystery, the magnetism, eventually the fame that she just can't, let go. But I don't see anything there resembling love. It's as if she's projecting everything that she wants him to be onto him, which again, I think would be a much more interesting film. But, Chalamet, I think, does a great impression. And I would say one of my problems is the fact that he did perform all of this music himself, because I was very consciously aware of him, like, this is the bit that's going to impress everyone. I'm singing Dylan songs. I'm not lip syncing to them. I'm trying really hard to get this. And so, again, from my perspective, and I don't know exactly going in with that knowledge if I could have been immersed and lost myself in the reality stories during these many musical sequences, if I could see him anything other than an actor doing a great job at bringing Dylan to screen rather than a character named Bob Dylan who's changing the world. David, jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. And if you want, Dylan has always been elusive, and he's never going to come out and say, this is who I am. This is because his focus has always been about the music. And correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but it's kind of his expectation of his listeners and followers and fans is my music should be sufficient on its own. That's it. It's like, who do you want? Who do you want me to be? It doesn't matter. Who am I? It doesn't matter. You mentioned superhero movies before, and it when you talk about the carnival stuff, it reminded me of Heath Ledger's Joker when he was talking to the different gangsters in Dark Knight about he keeps on changing his story about how he got his facial scars. It's always different. And that's the thing with Dylan is he would be kind of like coy and playful and acerbic and towards either interviewers or even friends, and just be like, why does it even matter? It's like, and sure, that's probably unattractive and standoffish, but I to me and to a lot of fans, that almost draws me in even closer, because it's like, all right, okay, I'm with you, and I want to get to know you even more. And the only way I'm able to get to know you is through your music. So I'm sold, and I just, the fact that, maybe you could consider it a dick move to like plug in at Newport, whatever. But you have to understand, it's like, and there's moments in this movie too that explains that. It's like he, at this point in his life, he was going from like political songs to more personal songs with political leanings here and there. And, his fans were like, what? No. It's like, what are you doing? And because he was in the folk community and everything, and granted, maybe we should have seen a little bit more of that backlash.
I think you should have seen all of it, because David, the only thing I got was that he was going to go electric and the folk people didn't like rock and roll. I didn't get any of the nuance of like, oh, his music is changing. That's the inside baseball stuff. That's the Dylan fan stuff, the fan service, possibly. Well, not even fan service is not actually in the text of the movie, I don't think. You're going to see it again. You will have seen this in the past again on IMAX by the time we see it. So report back and tell me where in the movie that is, because I'd be curious. But yeah, it feels like there is text in this movie, not subtext, but text that a true Dylan fan can fill in with previous knowledge, that someone watching it is like, wait, I don't understand this. But then David, you can explain, well, it's because of this and this and this. I'm like, that's awesome. Where's that in the movie?
Well, there's that line in the hotel right before he goes on. Well, right before I think the day before he's set to go on stage at Newport, where he's like, they're expecting me to continue to play "Blowin' in the Wind" for the rest of my life. And the funny thing is he did go on to play "Blowin' in the Wind" for the rest of his life, but almost every night it was a different "Blowin' in the Wind." Okay, so it was a different musical arrangement, and that's just how he is. It's like, I am not going to play the same thing all the time. I am not going to have a set list, all the time. At least at that point, when it came to the Never-Ending Tour, it's a little bit more predictable. But at this point, he was just like, hey, I'm not going to give the audience what they want, because I could be different each time I'm on stage. And that's what I appreciate about, because that to me is an artist. It's like, you can't expect a painter to paint the same thing all the time on canvas. It's all of how you feel at the time.
Well, the painter's different. I mean, that's this, David. It's a different genre.
Sure, of course.
Unless you're talking about Bob Ross.
Well, Dylan's also a painter, so we could talk about that.
He's also sported an afro like Bob Ross.
Right, that's true. That's true. He also painted Pretty Little Trees. That's anyway, sorry. Right. The thing is, and there's a scene where, and this kind of underscores what you were talking about, David, although the whole bit about they want me to play "Blowin' in the Wind," that doesn't give me any information about his evolution as a singer-songwriter. It's just the same kind of artist cliche we've seen in other movies and TV shows. You become known for something and you don't want to become a one-hit wonder or an oneater, as it were. But that scene where he's on the stage with Joan Baez, and they've got a rift, but they're out there, they're performing, and it's kind of the performance from hell, because he starts to refuse to do anything the audience wants. He's castigating them for wanting to hear that song. And yeah, I get it from an artist perspective, but also, an artist is an artist, but he's not Bob Dylan without people buying those records and spreading the word. So it's like, make that a press release after you perform that last show that, hey, I'm going to perform new stuff and old stuff. But if you got people showing up to hear "Blowin' in the Wind," you play "Blowin' in the Wind."
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I feel like if he would have broadcast that I'm going to be playing all new stuff and it's going to be electric, not only would there be an uproar, like if he were to broadcast that beforehand, not only would there be an uproar, but there'd probably be less than half of the amount of people that would show up for that set. And and the thing is, Dylan is all about like, look, I am going to subvert your expectations at every turn, and we're going to plug in, we're going to play. Like he didn't intend to play just 3 songs, but they were so almost like, savage towards him that he's like, I'm out of here. But again, you can, in retrospect, you can go back and say, why is he doing this? But to me, I mean, we're looking at like one of the seminal moments in folk and rock and roll, where they're colliding, like when blues went from rock. And then, the same thing like folk went to rock, it's like, it's changing with the times, but, and I think this movie does a good job of that. There's also a great scene back in the hotel room at the end where he's just all by himself.
The best.
We see him way back there, like in the background, and in the foreground, it's like a big party. It's like a blast, the whole hotel. And he is not part of that. It's not what he's about.
He's apart from it. Like he can't be part of that community. I compared that shot to the final shot of The Searchers by John Ford, where John Wayne cannot go into the house. He cannot become part of the community that he helped save. Yeah. He has to leave. The thing that allowed him to save the community is the same thing that makes him a freak, that makes him, have to walk away from it. So I found that shot of him sitting on the hotel bed absolutely heartbreaking, personally. The way Pete looks through the doorway and sees him, my expectation, I said, I know what's going to happen here. Pete's going to walk in the room and they're going to have a conversation. But he didn't. Pete just walked away. And I thought that was profoundly sad because it's like Pete knew that Dylan's move away from folk was permanent.
Yeah.
That it's like that break was, irrevocable.
And yeah, and I wasn't expecting Norton's Pete to be like soul moving and soulful to me. Like from the way Mangold sets up the whole alpha and omega of the movie, bookending Woody Guthrie's song, and also visiting Woody Guthrie at the beginning where Pete meets Dylan for the first time, towards the end, like that monologue bit that Norton has again back in the hotel room before he went on stage at Newport. You kind of have this expectations like, all right, this is the confrontation, he's going to get in his face, but he's just it's a gentle persuasion, it's a tenderness, but it's also there's this feeling of that Seeger has this acceptance of this inevitability, and I think Norton played that just fantastically.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he's a lot aside from I'm going to get her name. I'm going to look
Monica
it up right here.
Barbaro.
What's her name?
Monica, I think Barbaro was playing Joan Baez.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Because I was going to look up her name because I keep referring to her as Joan Baez, and but I think those are the two standout performances in the film. David, I want to go back to something you had mentioned, the whole idea of the clash of rock and folk, and that moment changed everything when Dylan went electric on that stage. This is where I think we could have used a bit more traditional biopic, because I know from history that is true. I don't know why it's true based on what this movie is showing me, because in a traditional biopic, he would have gone out there, plugged in, played the songs, and the jeering audience would have turned around and said, wait, this is great. We didn't know what we were missing. But he plays those songs and they still hate it. And then the movie's over. So again, as an outside viewer, I'm like, okay, so this is an alternate history where rock and roll died and never became a thing in the States. They mentioned the Beatles, I think, once in passing. But yeah, again, it just doesn't make any damn sense to me. Help me out.
Well, I mean, Ian, come on. Don't you know that rock and roll was popular after 1965? I mean, the movie does depend on your extra textual knowledge of pop culture history.
No,
I mean, and
not really, because if it's an origin story, they focus on the Newport Festival and its significance in this moment in rock and in folk and rock and how it changed things.
Yeah.
But by its nature, if the setup is the folk fans hate it, they don't want the organizers don't want to see him go electric and play rock and roll. The fans don't want to see him go electric and play rock and roll. At the end of the festival, he goes electric and plays rock and roll, and they still hate it. That's not the story of a breakthrough, an evolution, a revolution. It's the story of, well, what did you expect? And so again, from my perspective, yes, I understand that rock and roll is a phenomenon after 65, but if this is a lightning rod moment and the film is trying to tell me the story of why that change happened and they don't show me that any change happened, then I'm left wondering, would it be better to go a more traditional route?
I think the film does show that. I don't know if you watched it correctly, Ian, because while some people were booing, it was not everybody. It's not like everybody hated it.
You could see the audience.
Yeah, some people booed because they felt betrayed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even so much Dylan plugging in an electric guitar. It was the fact that he was no longer performing, what they called finger pointing songs.
Yeah.
It was the songs were no longer so as socially conscious as they had been. So people were booing for different reasons. And honestly, today, if you go back and read accounts of what happened that night, it is confusing. Like the book that this is based on is fantastic. It's called Going Electric. Dylan Goes Electric.
With an exclamation point. Yeah.
Yeah, and some people say, oh no, they were booing because the sound was too distorted. because like the technology just didn't exist to make that electric music sound good for that many people. So people did boo. They booed for different reasons. But the thing about Dylan is no matter how many people boo him at any point in his career, he also, has been able to win over new fans and to appease some part of his fan base. So, like David says, some of the people in that audience, you do see them responding in the film, and you
True.
also
But
see,
but let me say,
Alan
hold on.
Lomax talks about how he doesn't want electric music performed, but they make the point that black blues musicians did perform electrically at Newport, and that was not a problem, which I think is why you have that incredible scene where Dylan is jamming on Pete Seeger's TV show with this black blues musician named Jesse, who, by the way, is played by Muddy Waters' son.
Oh,
It's
wow.
because, Big Bill Morganfield is that guy's name. So you can feel, Dylan's love of blues music in that scene, but he's also, kind of taking it somewhere else. And a lot of people followed him where he took it.
Again, that's great, and I think that's cool context that you are bringing to this story. But that scene, that moment in the public access TV show, is close enough to the Newport concert that you might be able to infer that. But again, watching this for the first time as an outsider, that connection is not distinct enough for me. Now, I did watch the movie correctly because I went in and I gave it a chance and I looked at what it had to say. But to your point, maybe it's because Mangold wanted to capture the muddiness of the mythology of some people loved it, some people hated it, some people hated it because they couldn't hear it and not because of what he was doing on stage. But dramatically, as a viewer, you can have people booing and you can have people cheering, but the overall kind of chaos, the riotousness at the end of this film suggests that they didn't like it and they were trying to shut it down. And there wasn't enough of a movement of a lot of people saying, no, don't shut it down. Don't try. There should have been a number of people trying to restrain Pete Seeger from picking up that axe rather than his wife giving him a sassy look or something like that. Because I didn't know what was going on at the end of this movie.
The whole Seeger axe thing is a rumor, really. It's
never, a myth. It's a myth.
It's a myth, and it's a myth that Seeger initially rolled his eyes to, but as the years progressed, and not long after the rumor started, he just kind of went with it because
it sounds kind of cool.
It's fun. Yeah. So it's like, oh yeah, there was an axe there, and I was about to. Yeah. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from, Ian. I'm glad that it didn't check off the standard biopic boxes to me. I'm glad that Chalamet performed all these, and Barbero performed, and Norton performed all of these songs, live, that there was no dubbing, that there was no, that would have been awful. And I'm also glad that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think most of these songs were, we almost see them played entirely through, there's no like montage to me, not that I remember. And I think, to me, that's just another way of letting the music breathe and letting the audience take it in, instead of like, and then there was a hit and he went on tour and there's a montage and they show a little, going from Indianapolis up to, no, we don't need to see all that, because our brains will fill in the spots that we're missing. But to me, like, gosh, I just was not expecting such poignant scenes as like the whole Woody Guthrie bedside, and Scoot McNairy did a great job as bedridden Woody Guthrie.
Incredible, yeah.
Help me out with something. What was wrong with Woody Guthrie?
So go ahead, Michael.
He had Huntington's disease, which was a degenerative hereditary disease, where you kind of lose control of your motor skills. And at the time that Dylan visited him in the hospital, he had basically lost the ability to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's true. You know, Dylan did sit in front of him and play a song that he wrote about him. Yeah. And then, by the way, that was the first time I cried in the movie. But, you know, I know you got a heart out soon, Ian. So I just want to segue a little bit, and I just want to make my final argument and say
The
that.
floor is yours, sir.
And I want to say your analogy between Dylan and Andy Warhol, I think, is excellent. You know, Warhol broke down barriers in the world of visual arts, in the world of painting. He made you question, what is a painting? And is this even art if you just are photocopying something, or if you're just, you know, painting a simple circle on a canvas? Like, you know, could my kid do that? Dylan broke down the barriers of songwriting to the point where today anything can be a song. Like, lyrics don't have to rhyme. You can throw anything in a song and it doesn't matter. And that begins with Dylan. And I think that this film shows that. And, you know, you said earlier, well, you say these songs are personal, but I didn't understand why they were personal to him. The final thing that I want to say is, Dylan's personal songs are effective not because of what they reveal about him. It's not like, oh, well, he wrote Don't Think Twice, It's All Right about his girlfriend at the time. They're effective because of what they reveal about you, the listener. You know, we hear him sing a number of songs in this film, like Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, Girl from the North Country, It Ain't Me, Babe, where he's expressing these sentiments that had never been expressed in a love song before. Like in Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, he sings, you know, you just kind of wasted my precious time. In 1963, nobody had ever expressed that. You know, love songs were sentimental love songs. They were, you know, they were sappy, you know, I want to be with you, or like, you broke my heart and I'm still in love with you. And Dylan is saying, this entire relationship, you wasted my time. We've all felt that way. You know, we've all felt that way. And he was the first person to do that. And that's why he won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
See, I agree with what you're saying. But again, the movie doesn't even suggest that. If there had been more talk about what the kind of contemporary songwriting or the tradition of songwriting, love song, the milieu was, and why he came and changed that, or how he did it, I think that would have been much more compelling, because we know these songs. They're on you know, oldies radio. They're in movie soundtracks. They're ubiquitous. Again, it's the water in which we all swim. So it's easy to forget that they had a historical context to begin with. When we're presented with a story of why we appreciate that history, context, I think, is key. I love what you just described, and I want to see that movie. I want to see the grumpy record exec saying, you know, Buddy Holly never wrote about, you know, betrayal or anything like that. It was all like doopy doopy doo. So what's this kid doing? That's interesting to me. But David, I want to give you the last word as we wrap up here.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better than what Michael just said, but I think, you know, this is one of those rare, to me, like, usually when I'll see a biopic, especially about a musician, I'll see it once and then I'm like, okay. But I want to go back and revisit this, you know, kind of again and again. Not just because I'm a Dylan fan, but I feel like it's rare to, you know, see a movie, to me, that's kind of transporting you to kind of momentous moment in pop culture and America, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to revisiting this, and I think it deserves all the accolades.
All right. Well, what you have there, ladies and gentlemen, is two beautiful, plump, fuzzy Christmas stockings overflowing with candy canes, presents, and joy. And one, I'm wearing the black shirt for a reason, lump of coal. So go out and see this movie. Go see A Complete Unknown. Let us know what you think down in the comments. If you've seen it and you love it, that's great. Tell me why I'm wrong. If you had a less than positive feeling about it, keep that to yourself, because I don't want to rain on anybody's parade any more than I already have. But I want to thank Michael Glover Smith. I want to thank David Fowlie. Again, check out Michael's latest film, Handle with Care. I'll have a link down below. You got to check it out. It's great. Also, I'll link to your website. You have a website with links to all your other films, I assume.
No, not anymore. The domain name expired and I never renewed it.
Oh, boy.
So how do people find your work, Michael?
I'm just on. Just go to Instagram. I'm White City Cinema on Instagram.
Right. Okay.
That's to find it.
And people will be able to get links to rent
Yes.
or view all of your great films. Okay. So yes, we'll have that information below. And David Fowlie of Keeping It Real, your link will be down below as well, of course. So thank you guys very much for talking with me about this movie. I hope we're still friends, and and it's been a tremendous pleasure. So thanks very much. Until next time, everybody out there, if you like this show, please like and subscribe and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thanks very much and take care.